Now there's bad news. Do you know this guy? This guy's name is Juan Manuel Alvarez. And this is a guy that had a girlfriend. It was about 4 years ago and 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks. It was just before Valentine's Day, about 2.5 weeks before Valentine's Day. And he was in love with his girlfriend, and his girlfriend dumped him. And it was a very painful experience for Juan. He became very despondent, and he thought about suicide. And so what Juan did is unthinkable. He decided that he would kill himself. So he got into an SUV, and this was up around the Glendale area. And he drove onto the railroad tracks and put his car in park, and he waited for a train to come. He knew the schedule, didn't have to wait long. As the train approached, he changed his mind. He jumped out of the car to safety. Unfortunately, the train hit the SUV. And when it hit the SUV, it not only knocked the car and totaled the car, but the train jackknifed. And when the train jackknifed across 2 other tracks, another train was coming, and it ran into the first train. All in all, 11 people died. It was the worst train accident at that time. Up to that time in the United States, it was the worst train accident. 11 people died, hundreds were injured. And Juan Manuel Alvarez, just a few months ago, was finally sentenced after his trial, and he was charged with 11 counts of murder, and he was spared the death penalty, but he was given 11 life sentences without the chance of parole. This is what the Glendale train wreck looked like. It was January 26 in 2005. It was very early in the morning, 6:03 a.m. There is a picture of some of the cars. You can see what a terrible, mangled mess it was. And everyone wondered why just 11 people had died. They thought, given the conditions, the way the cars looked, that many more people would have died, but they did not. One of the guys on the train was a guy by the name of John Phipps. And John didn't always ride the trains, but he did occasionally, and it was a little unusual for him to be on the train, but he was this day. He had decided to take the train. He worked in the aerospace industry. He was on his way to work. And because it was so early in the morning, when he finally got on the train, he laid back and he was taking a nap. So he was asleep when the accident occurred. He was sound asleep. He did not even know that the accident happened because he woke up because he had been in a coma. He woke up minutes after the wreck, and there he was in a prone position. He was lying on his back, and there was debris that had shifted and flipped. It was all over him. He was pinned in the car. He could not move his legs. But he did have a little room to move his arms, and he could breathe. And so he was in this train wreck. And when he woke up, he didn't even know what had happened. But the only thing that he could see lying on his back was this seat above him. The seat, it was from the train car, had actually turned upside down. And so he was staring at the back side of the bottom of the seat. And he wondered what in the world is going on. He could hardly believe it. And then he noticed and experienced the pain. His head hurt, and so he put his hand in the back of his head and looked at it, and there was blood. His back hurt, and he reached around and felt his back, and there was more blood. And then his side hurt, and he looked down as much as he could at his side, and he felt with his hand, which he could move, and he found that he was bleeding from his side. So totally trapped, with debris all around him, he was screaming for help. Nobody's answering him. He discovers that he's bleeding from 3 places in his body, and he resigns himself to the fact that he is trapped and he's going to bleed to death. He probably has minutes or less to live. That's how he woke up from his sound sleep on the car. What John Phipps did was an amazing thing. He reached into his side again and got his finger dripping with blood, and he began to write on the seat above him. Because there was no paper, there was no pencil, there was no pen. He was trapped, he was pinned in, and he decided to write with his own blood. And this is what he did. He wrote, I, and then he made a heart with his own blood in his finger. I love. And he drew an L and an E and an S and an L and an I and an E. He wrote, I love Leslie. Leslie was his wife. And then he also wrote with his own blood and his finger, I love my K-I-D-S and the number 2. Said, I love Leslie, and I love my kids too. Just after this happened, just minutes after it happened, rescuers were calling out. And he answered. And the good news about this story is that he was rescued. He did not die. And the rescuers brought that seat cushion to his house and gave it to Leslie. What a great Valentine's gift that was. You know, another man 2,000 years ago was bleeding from his side.